When Yoda appeared upon Geonosis with the clone army that had been developed in secret for the Republic on Kamino, it ignited a galactic civil war that was planned by both Palpatine and his master Darth Plagueis for decades. With the outbreak of the Clone War, the Sith planned to retake control of the galaxy by destroying both the Jedi and the Republic entered its endgame. One of the key elements of this plan developed by Palpatine and Plagueis was to provide the Jedi with an army that would fight beside them, but then who would ultimately betray and kill the Jedi to destroy their order. However, the original plan developed by Palpatine and his master was not to provide the Jedi and the Republic with a clone army to fight with them. Rather, the original plan of the Sith was to clone an army that would fight against them, and provide a dagger to the heart of the Jedi Order. In this video expose, I will explain how the clone army was originally supposed to fight against the Jedi, as envisioned by both Palpatine and Plagueis, and also describe why the Sith ultimately reversed their strategy. A full 30 years before the outbreak of the Clone War, and at least 20 years before the ultimate commissioning of the clone army from the Kaminoans, Darth Plagueis and his apprentice Palpatine discussed their plans for the destruction of the Jedi Order. Plagueis always envisioned making use of the cloning capabilities of Kamino to produce a grand army to attack the Jedi and the Republic, funded through his vast wealth acquired through his connections with the intergalactic banking clan. 3 decades before the outbreak of the war, Palpatine and Plagueis never gave thought to the possibility of creating an army for the Jedi. Rather, their original plans were firmly set upon using their clones to destroy them. However, even in these early conversations between the two Sith, an understanding was beginning to emerge, particularly on the side of Palpatine, that the clone army might be more effective as a force to fight with the Jedi instead of against them. Both Sith Lords understood their plan was not going to be easy, and in addition to their attack from the outside, other parameters would have to be met. As Palpatine stated, the Jedi will have to be felled from within, lured into a trap of their own devising. We will have to exploit their vanity and blind obedience to the Republic. They must be made to appear the enemies of peace and justice, rather than the guardians. While it's debatable that Palpatine started to realize by this point, 30 years before the start of the Clone War, that the original plan of cloning an army to fight against the Jedi should be replaced with one that fought with them, Plagueis certainly still was committed to the original idea and wanted their clone army to be directed at the Jedi. This is clear because following his discussion with Palpatine, still 3 decades before the outbreak of the Clone War, Plagueis contacted the cloners on Kamino to make preparations for growing the Sith, an army to be used against the Jedi and the Republic. However, it was this early discussion with the Kaminoans that acted as the catalyst that would eventually convince the Sith to provide the Jedi with an army that they could ultimately control. This is because the Kaminoans made it clear to Plagueis that his original plan to clone an army of Yinkori was not practical, and in many ways impossible. Plagueis had always envisioned that his grand army to wage war against the Jedi would be comprised of Yinkori clones, given that the Yinkori were a species that were highly aggressive and natural warriors. But more importantly, they were naturally force resistant. While the Yinkori would have made excellent warriors against the Jedi, the Kaminoans informed Plagueis that his plans to clone them would be ineffective, as they were unable to maintain the Yinkori's levels of aggression while at the same time instilling within them the necessary amount of compliance. Therefore, although Plagueis was still firmly set on cloning an army to be used against the Jedi 30 years before the events of Attack of the Clones, we do see the seeds of change start to emerge in the plans of the Sith, following Plagueis' discussions with Palpatine and the Kaminoans, as Plagueis' original idea of cloning the Yinkori was not feasible. So then at what point did the Sith change their plans to develop a clone army that would fight against the Jedi to one that would fight with them? The important point where we can definitively say that Plagueis, and certainly Palpatine as well, became convinced that the clone army was more effective as an army for the Jedi was not long after Plagueis' discussions with the Kaminoans, still roughly 30 years before the army would see its first action. The motivation for the Sith to change strategy came when Plagueis engaged a number of Jedi at a meeting on the planet of Sereno as his alter ego Higo the Mask, including then Jedi Masters Dooku and Sifo Dyas. In discussing the coming election of the Supreme Chancellor and the potential for a candidate named Kalpana to be elected, who was against piratism, smuggling, and slavery, the conversation turned to general discontent and inter-system conflict, given that the Outer Rim worlds survived due to those practices. As Plagueis discussed the potential for the Jedi to militarize in the face of such growing opposition to the Republic, the Dark Lord of the Sith recognized the galactic situation for what it was. There was anti-Republic sentiment growing across the galaxy, which Dooku and Sifo Dyas were all too aware of themselves, and that the Republic was pledged to remain demilitarized through the Ruusan reformations a millennium earlier, and would only militarize in the face of a perceived threat. Realistically, Plagueis realized that there was no shortage in enemies of the Republic. In fact, it was the Republic and Jedi who lacked the army that could engage in a galaxy-wide full-scale conflict. At this point, Plagueis also remembered the words of his apprentice Palpatine. Providing the Republic with an army to fight with in a galaxy-wide war would help to exploit the Jedi's self-righteousness and their blind obedience to the Republic, eventually turning the Jedi into the enemies of peace and justice rather than their guardians. With this, Plagueis rethought the original plan of the Sith and considered that he'd taken the wrong approach with the cloners of Kamino, wherein rather than creating an army to fight against the Jedi, it would be better for the clone army to fight alongside them. Therefore, although the Sith would go on to focus on different goals, such as Plagueis' manipulation of midichlorians to achieve immortality, and Palpatine working his way up the political ladder to become Supreme Chancellor, the original plan of the Sith regarding the clone army was changed going forward. Over the next 20 years, the Sith proceeded with their plans not to create a clone army that would fight against the Jedi and the Republic, but rather to fight with them, and ultimately to defeat them from within and to turn the sentiments of the galaxy against both institutions. So there we have it. How the clone army was originally planned to fight against the Jedi, and why the Sith ultimately reversed this strategy. We love making these videos, so why not subscribe for more fun Star Wars theories and discussions? Also, if you enjoyed the video, think about giving a like or leaving a comment. If not for me... for Yinkori Stormtrooper...